Hello, everybody. Welcome to Little Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Click that link in the description if you would like to participate in these videos. But without further ado, let's get into these hot takes. From Pete the Weapon, the NBA should have a jeans night, something similar to how they brought back the Lakers' short shorts for 1/4 of a game. Nothing is more real than hooping in jeans with your boys and shooting 6 for 41 from the field. God damn. I'm good. Why not? Because it's funny. But if you want my actual take on that, I don't know. Do you feel like there's some kind of injury risk involved in that? Rudy off the side said, do the Rising Stars game in jeans. They're younger. They can handle the jean restriction. From Reed Shepherd hater. All right. You're a Rockets fan and you hate Reed Shepherd. I get it. I'm not like I've not hated Bulls players plenty, but geez, if Thompson gets a consistent 3-ball, which is looking promising in the preseason, he has a higher ceiling than Wemby. Okay, I know what the title take is. Better playmaker. Pretty equal on the defensive end. I'd give the slight edge to Amen, being that he can legit guard 1 through 5 any night. The plague of versatility discourse. Let me tell you, it is crazy to think that because Amen can defend guards better, that makes him a better defender than Wemby. You're off your fucking rocker. Call me a Wemby doubter or an Amen glazer, but if he develops a 3, he will legit have no weakness to his game. Okay, well, who's already developed a 3 and it isn't a complete shot in the dark as to if that is ever going to happen? Victor Wembanyama, who has one of the most impactful defensive packs, I guess. Fucking Victor Wembanyama. Wow. Like, don't get me wrong. If Amen is you didn't even say like good. You said consistent. Like, if Amen shoots 37% on 5 threes a game at his peak, we'll say that. You think that's enough for him to be better than Wemby? You're a crazy person. I really, really, really like Amen Thompson. I think Amen could become a perennial all-star. Though he is not 7'7", he is still a freakish athlete in his own way, like one of the craziest athletes I have ever seen in the NBA. But higher ceiling than Wemby is fucking crazy. That's crazy. Oh my God. I don't think there will be a player with more potential than Wemby. 7'3" KD with Kareem defense. Only way someone can have more if there was a 7'7" Wemby. I just cannot wrap my mind around that take. From Briscoe, hot take, Rusty should get into college hoops. I have not gotten into college hoops for a simple reason. A very large percentage of my day is spent consuming NBA basketball. Like a very, very large percentage, and it is my bread and butter. So I would rather be more proficient in talking about the NBA than basically cut some of that NBA time to watch college basketball. I recognize I could technically enter like another market by doing that, but I'm really not that interested in it. The same reason I haven't watched the WNBA. Or the same reason that I stopped watching college football once this became my career. Like, I would just rather focus my energy into knowing more and more and more about the NBA, because I'm never going to run short. There's never not going to be things to learn about this league. There's a very long storied history, whether it is the history stuff or whether it is learning about the game of basketball itself. I would rather just put more energy into learning more about the NBA than divulging to another league. So that's the reason that I don't talk about prospects much. That's the reason that I'm like, whenever I talk about a draft pick, I don't have a solid opinion really until I see them in the NBA. So I just can't do it. I would have to either watch even more basketball than I already am, which is quite a bit. I would have to cut out a percentage of NBA coverage, and I'm not doing that. So that's the way it is in my mind. Unfortunately, I do have a life outside of this sport. I do like to spend time with my girlfriend and enjoy myself. I do like to smoke weed and stare at the ceiling from time to time. There's only so much basketball consumption that I can fit into my day, and as long as my career is about the NBA, it's going to be the NBA exclusively. If I wasn't doing this for a career, if I was just a basketball fan, period, I'd watch some more college basketball. I'd watch some WNBA. I'd watch college football. But I just need to limit my scope because the scope of the NBA is so massive. It doesn't even really feel like a limitation. Appreciate the take. I'm not doing that. From Cade Cunninghamster, Zach LaVine has become so overrated that he is now underrated. As a player last year, he averaged 23.3 points, 4.2 assists on 51, 44, 82 splits. His playmaking isn't as bad as is stated, and his scoring is better than it's ever been. I don't know about that. His personality is also underrated, though he is being paid a bunch. He always goes and does what is asked of him, improving in departments they want him to, and has always been fine doing his best whatever he's at and never asks for trades. Zach LaVine is a consummate professional. I can say that quite confidently. He behaved very professionally for the entirety of his Bulls tenure when he really had plenty of reasons not to. Like, I had a lot of respect for him in the way that he handled the Jim Boylan situation, because Jim Boylan was being a fucking child while being like 30 years older than him. I think his playmaking, the thing is, his playmaking is a lot better in the context of not being the lead guy. Like, and that's the thing that I've said about Zach. Zach is still a good NBA player, but he just cannot be your primary ball handler. That's a terrible idea. And as much as Sacramento is a fucking disaster shitstorm that is going to be a very hard watch this year, I do think that Zach in that situation is more well suited to be a more effective player. Like, I really liked Zach LaVine when the Bulls had Lonzo Ball, DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic. Like, when that team was healthy, when Lonzo was there, I thought Zach LaVine was really, really good in that context, because he could focus more on just being a shooter, focus more on scoring within the flow of the offense rather than creating for himself and others. It was just way, way better. That said, his scoring is better than it ever was? No, that's not true. Because Zach LaVine used to be a really good, prolific slasher, and as the years have gone on, as he's gotten older, as his athleticism has declined and he's lost a step a little bit, he has just become more and more and more jump shot oriented, which has added to a volatility for his offense. But on a positive note, he is such a fucking knockdown three-point shooter that it doesn't really matter. Like, he's still a very, very effective offensive weapon, and I always felt like he was a better shooter than he was a slasher. Always felt like he would be more suited to a more off-ball role. Let me pull up Zach's shooting splits. Like, look at the way these percentages have declined. First year, let's just go first 3 years in Chicago. First 3 years in Chicago, 36% of his shots were right at the rim, and he shot 65%. Pretty much since then, he is down to 26% of his shots at the rim, so a 10% decline. I honestly would have expected it to be a little bit higher than that. And he shoots 5% better. When you reduce your volume, it just typically means you're taking out some of your worst shots. Also, I think his mid-range shooting is probably a little bit better now. Maybe not. It's probably, well, it's not substantially better, but it is better. So Zach LaVine, good-ass player. I do agree at this point that he is underrated. At this point, I almost want the Bucks to say screw it and trade Giannis, send him to Brooklyn, Toronto, wherever he doesn't want to go. No offense to the Nets or Raptors fans. I'm just tired of the non-committal we'll see stuff. Giannis knows what this roster looks like. He knows what a real contender looks like. If winning a championship is truly his top priority, then ask out. Stars do it all the time, but if what matters more is being where you're comfortable, then at least acknowledge the reality. The Bucks have limited options, and this retool is going to take some time, and you're going to have to be patient. I'm not even mad at Giannis specifically. It's more about the exhausting discourse his vague comments stir up every time. But at a certain point, he has to know what kind of reaction he's provoking. So yeah, maybe I am mad at Giannis after all. I did a video on this, the Giannis like consistently fanning the flames just enough to create discourse, but not enough for anything real to come of it. So I can't, like, I don't know. I think he's kind of doing a little bit of trolling, which is an energy that he has always had. The other thing, like, you're saying he knows what a contender looks like. He knows what this roster looks like. The thing is, like, players delude themselves all the time. That's like a very signature part of being a player, is you will delude yourself. Like, the amount of times that, like, I remember Tristan Thompson, I think, in 2019, was like, we're the team that went to the finals most recently, so we're still a contender. And you lost LeBron. What are you talking about? That's not true at all. You're delusional. Like, shit like that happens all the time. Derrick Rose got traded to the Knicks, and he was like, they're saying it's us and the Warriors who are the super teams in the NBA. Like, NBA players warp themselves into believing unbelievable, blatantly untrue stuff all the time. I don't think Giannis is strictly lying when he's saying that he believes in this team. I think he deluded himself into believing in this team, or that he's so good that the team only needs to be okay for them to get it done. Because to be fair, Giannis has not been healthy in the playoffs for quite a while. So maybe his thought process has been that, like, the last couple of years, the only thing that's really gone wrong is that I can't fit in, or I'm not healthy. So maybe in his mind, health is all that they really need. So you can't really blame players for that delusion. It is very commonplace. And unfortunately, you just got to factor it into the equation because it is always there. I don't think that Giannis is bullshitting when he says that he believes in this team and he's going to try with this team. The other thing, just strategically speaking, I think trade deadline trades typically result in a lesser return. Could be mistaken on that. I wonder what the track record of that is. Typically speaking, stars getting traded at the deadline, like, there's an extra degree of desperation there that I think makes it just a lot more easy to actually accept such a thing. I think maybe it's also like, I want to be traded to this team, but not get a shitload of assets taken in the process. Like, I still want the team to be good. From Briscoe, I don't think Shaq taking his diet and fitness more seriously would have changed anything drastically about how his career ended up, and some alternative timeline where he did, I don't think changes where his standing would have ended up in the overall GOAT discussion. Shaq was basically washed at like 33, I want to say. His numbers saw a steep decline in 2004 when he was 31 years old, and he had his second in MVP voting season after that at 32. So he's done being a 20-point per game scorer at 33. If Shaq is Shaq until he's 35, instead of having like literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years that are major down years by comparison to where he was at the very end of the LA three-peat. Like, I don't really think that's fair. I do think that if he played at a near 30 point per game mark for an extra 5 years, I think that goes a long ass way. The other thing is, if Shaq doesn't leave the Lakers, if Shaq is in shape, the beef between him and Kobe is less likely to boil over. It also results in him winning more championships. I gotta disagree. That is just not I don't agree with you, basically. Shea already has a higher single season peak than Kobe. This take was over on the hot takes on Rusty Buckets the other day. The take was that Shea would surpass Kobe. It is worth saying that the season that Shea had is one of the greatest guard seasons of all time, and I do think it is better than Kobe's best year, because he won MVP, he won the championship, he won finals MVP, he got the scoring title, his team won 68 games. Like, that is so much phenomenal shit to happen in a row, where Kobe has years where he's done these things individually, but he does not have a year where he did all of them. He won MVP in 2008, and they did not win the championship that year. They won in 2009, and he got finals MVP, but no MVP that year, nor did he win the scoring title. And I've highlighted this before. Like, if you look at scoring title players throughout history, you almost never win a championship unless you are Shaq, unless you are Kareem, or unless you are Michael Jordan. Then SGA did it. SGA did that. So I do think it is fair to say that that is a better single season peak than Kobe. I also have said that I think Dwayne Wade had a slightly better peak than Kobe. This is a 1 year conversation. Like, Kobe is well above Dwayne Wade all time because of the accumulation of 20 years of play. But if we're just talking absolute best year, most accomplished year, there are very few players throughout league history who accomplished more in a single season than Kobe. Even Steph does not have a season where he was scoring title, MVP, champion, finals MVP, 68 wins. Like it's a very crazy thing that literally only Michael Jordan has ever achieved playing the guard spot. So I think that's a reasonable take. This is in reaction to my top 100 list, the consensus top 100 list, and going over that. All of those players you named after Paul George in your top 100 vid, LaVine, Turner, Powell, Murphy, are not better than him in the slightest still. Even last year, he was an 80th percentile ISO scorer and spot-up scorer. He was still an extremely productive defensive playmaker. It was fun to pile on Paul, but it was a clear down year that was, like you said, partially due to his and other injuries. If the NBA had a comeback award like the NFL, I'd predict it to be him this season. I also do have Philly as a playoff team this year, as a 6th seed with a ceiling of 4th and a floor as a 7th. They definitely have a floor well below 7th, if you're just saying in the playoff picture. As I said in that video, if Paul George ends up being better this year, then he could absolutely be better than all of these guys. However, just coming off of last year, all of those guys were better than Paul George last year. Like, I can say that quite confidently. If things were different in the context of the team, maybe that would be different. But we're also, when it comes to a dude who is like, how old is Paul George at this point? Like 33, 34, maybe even 35. He's 35 years old, turned that age in May. So he was 34 almost all of last year. Like, if you're that old, I'm going to assume the decline is real, far more than I would if he just had a down year. Like Devin Booker had a down year last year, but I'm not banking on that being what he is from now on. Also, 80th percentile ISO score is not that great, and it's certainly much lower than his peak, to be clear. So, like, I would rather have a Zach LaVine who is going to be a flamethrower on offense. Same for Norman Powell. Trey Murphy, I think, is a very, very good offensive player. High volume 3-point shooter, super athletic. Averaged 20 last year. Miles Turner maybe is worse. Miles Turner, I kind of think, is secretly not very good. That's it. I think this is from Johnny Broom's Strongest Soldier. I think in a hypothetical 1v1 across all of NBA history, I think the players that would best perform would be Hakeem and Embiid. I don't hate that. I think too many people, when they get into this conversation, get way too caught up in, like, I don't know, bag talk. And obviously, like, having multiple moves and one-on-one actually does matter more than in a team context, because you're going to be in a situation where you need to bail yourself out more often. However, I think being a massive ass dude who's a really good defender and pretty good on your feet, like, takes that away. In a one-on-one Michael Jordan versus Giannis, I'm taking Giannis. Not because Giannis is a better scorer than Mike, but in a one-on-one context, I think he does a way better job defending Michael than Michael would do defending Giannis. Hakeem is probably the best answer, though, because he is both a great defender, quick on his feet for a big man, and crazy deep bag. And you can say the same for Embiid. I don't think Embiid has the same amount of mobility as Hakeem, although maybe he does, honestly. Maybe I'm just thinking too much of out of shape Joel Embiid. But either way, I do think that is a pretty good list. Like, a big man that can move well and has a ton of different moves in their bag, that's probably a pretty good answer. I also think that Anthony Davis would do really, really well in that type of situation. Wemby is so valuable as a player that you couldn't even trade 05, 06 LeBron for Wemby. I don't know about that. For Wemby, it's health concerns. I think there are far more health concerns with young Wemby than young LeBron, so I would still happily I would rather trade Wemby for LeBron. But also, I have the hindsight of knowing what LeBron will become versus who's to say. But in response to Rusty's last hot takes video, in this video I asked, like, what's the best top 10 players ever? What's the best top 10 players in the NBA in 1 year? Alchemical Toast? I was thinking you were going for, like, alchemy, but alchemical? I don't know. He goes 87, 88. MJ, Magic, Bird, Hakeem, Isaiah Thomas, Charles Barkley, Clyde Drexler, Patrick Ewing, Dominique Wilkins, Kevin McHale. I refuse to put the pedophile on the list. I get that. Karl Malone was better than Kevin McHale, unfortunately. Jordan does a lot of carrying if we're comparing it to today, but I still think it's the best ever. Magic and Bird were still pretty close to their peak at this point. Larry Bird, I think, not as much. I think that's right around where he started to decline. Oh, he averaged 39 and 6. No, it was the season after that happened, because he played 6 games the season after and then just wasn't quite the same after that. But this is the last year where Bird is Bird. Magic was really good in 88. In fact, I believe he won MVP that year. No, he was third in MVP voting that year. So he actually had kind of a down year in between his MVP seasons there. So that's interesting. Who the fuck won 88 MVP? Oh, Michael Jordan. Duh. That was the year where he averaged fucking 35, 6, and fucking 4.8 stocks. Jesus Christ. That's an incredible top 3. You mentioned Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley in 1988 is averaging 28 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 2.5 stocks. Shot 63% on 14 2-point field goals a game. That's crazy. That's a really good pick. That is a really, really good year, because a cross between the 80s and the 90s, where you get like MJ and Hakeem, who I wouldn't say their absolute peak seasons were in the 80s, but they're still very, very good years, while Magic and Bird are still Magic and Bird. To have that overlap at that time, because that's kind of like in between, like right before a transition happens where it becomes more about the more 90s oriented players. But again, you still have the best players of the 80s still being the best players of the 80s, all while MJ, Hakeem, Barkley, and Ewing, who are more so of the next decade, are still very much putting up bonkers fucking numbers. That's a really, really good list. Wemby Enthusiast says Buzelis will be the greatest Bull that's ever played who isn't bald. I don't know. I feel like you might be cursing him to baldom with that one. Who knows? Another one from Briscoe. More of a tough question than a take. How many of teams being in cap hell do you put on just outright bad contracts that shouldn't have been thought of? And how much would you put on purely the apron system operates? Also, how do you see the future of it, ideally to curb teams from being in cap hell? Well, I do think the problem is it's kind of like Pandora's box, where if you decide, okay, we are trading for, or we are signing, we are willing to give max contracts to like the 30th best player in the NBA. As soon as one team starts doing that, it's kind of like everyone else has to, because otherwise I'll go get money elsewhere. Or like, why are you not treating me as well as these other guys are being treated? Like the fucking contract that Keegan Murray just got is absolutely egregious. Absolutely egregious to make $30 million a year based on what he has done. I just don't think there is enough evidence to back up him being worth that amount of money. Like stuff like that. Like I think this started with like Tobias Harris, the summer of 16, like the Timothy Mozgov contract, like shit like that. As soon as we got into that point where teams are just throwing around money kind of stupid, it just became a more common trend around the league at large to where, oh, you're the 35th best player in the NBA. Well, you can anticipate that max contract coming around the corner. So I think it just became like a more the way that the league operates thing, where teams are far less willing to just lose out on talent. They're more happy to overpay. We're seeing the consequences of that now. I don't know that you can blame it on teams individually so much as the collective that just kind of started deciding to play this way or to do it this way. I don't know. I think the apron rules have made it worse, but I think what made the apron suck so much worse is that we were already in an era of overpaying players. So on top of the salary rules being as restrictive as they are, we also had a bunch of contracts that were already on the books that were outlandish. I think the tides are turning that way a little bit. Like Kuminga and Josh Giddey and Quentin Grimes and Cam Thomas this last summer, like 2-3 years ago, I think those guys would have got paid immediately. I think they would have got 20+ million guaranteed on the dot immediately without much hesitation. back then, but now teams are more conscious of their spending because of the apron, and they're like, we're actually going to make sure there's a market for you before we're willing to pay for you. And to me, that's always been the smartest move. Like, I don't know, there's enough talent in the NBA. Stop acting like the moment a player who's pretty good leaves, you're fucked. Like, you can afford to lose a top 35 NBA player, and you are far more likely to get fucked by overpaying that guy than you are to get fucked by moving on and trying to find somebody else who is either better or won't ask for that much money. Whichever it is, like, I think in a way the apron is balancing it back more towards what it should be, but I also agree that the apron is a little bit too extreme in what it does. So I think I think I'd probably chalk it up to 50-50. Like, the culture around the league in general made it worse than what it could have been if this rule was put into place a decade ago, but the rule has not made that situation easier by any means. All right, this will be the last take of the video from Reeves' Strongest Soldier. The stupidest Nets decision in their recent years was fucking up the 18-19 team. Now, I know that team wasn't any championship team, but they were on track to smoothly recover from the KG Pierce Terry trade and had a young, talented core and a young all-star in D'Lo. Also note, Jaren Allen was about to have his breakout that year. That showed that there was hope on the horizon for the team getting better. Nuking all of the young players for the KD, Harden, Kyrie big three, and then losing all of them basically sent the team back to the Stone Age instantly. Also, to anyone who's saying hindsight is 20/20, that isn't completely true, as there were some red flags that could have been seen off rip, like the sign and trade with D'Lo, which was just to make money for DeAndre Jordan to be signed with a pay cut to Kyrie and KD. Wasn't that necessary to facilitate the KD trade, not just clearing up some cap space for DeAndre Jordan? I don't know. Also, D'Lo and Kyrie absolutely should not play together. It makes sense. The thing is, I can't imagine. I don't think it was wrong to go and get Kyrie and KD. I think what's wrong is they went and got Kyrie and KD and said, fuck everything about the 18-19 team. Forget everybody who's on this team who is good. Trade Jarrett Allen. Trade Karis LeVert, like, trade everybody. And I didn't really think that made sense. Like, don't do the James Harden trade. Instead, have Jarrett Allen at your center position. Don't sign DeAndre Jordan. Keep Karis LeVert off of the bench. And mainly, the big one, don't fire Kenny Atkinson. Don't let Kevin Durant and Kyrie go in there and say, hey, this guy who just kind of revolutionized the culture of this team that had absolutely no hope, let's toss him to the curb for Steve Nash, who's far more of a yes man. Like, to me, that's where they went wrong. I don't think there is any world where they pass on the ability to get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but there is a world where they could have been less throw everything from the season prior to the side mentality. Like, they didn't have to go all in one direction or the other, but they very much chose to go all in the direction around KD and Kyrie. So I think that was dumber than just outright getting those guys. I don't think there's any world where you pass on them, but you could have done better with how you managed it after you got those guys. That is it. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.